Good morning, KYRA Connect. It's my great privilege to be accompanied by Anna Miller, who is KYRA Mobilise Research Champion with specific focus for mental health and wellbeing, joining us this morning. Thank you so much for joining KYRA Connect today, Anna, to discuss the really important issue of mental health and wellbeing for schools at the moment. So lovely to have you joining us today. I'd like to start really by asking, why is it so important to focus on and prioritise staff mental health and wellbeing now and in the longer term for our schools?
Thank you, Lesley. It's lovely to be here and to just have a few minutes to chat this through with you. I think it's so important. I think it's the number one thing we're hearing from schools and that schools want to talk about at the minute is staff wellbeing. And I think that's really understandable, and it's really right that they're doing that. So really, I wanted to chat to you around kind of two perspectives around that question. So the feedback that we're hearing from schools, and also what does the evidence say? So the feedback we are hearing from schools across a variety of different settings in Lincolnshire, staff in a variety of different roles, is that staff are starting to experience some significant difficulties. They've existed and worked through such a challenging period of time, and I think it's the extended period of time that this has gone on for with the pandemic that's really exacerbating things at the moment. What we know is that staff, if we think about lockdown 1, worked incredibly hard and were incredibly resilient on the whole, because they had to be. They're kind of existing on adrenaline and just pushing through, and they've done that for a really, really long time. Many members of staff have done that with no breaks or very few proper breaks. And so I think what we're hearing now from schools is the impact of all of that. So we're hearing people talking about just exhaustion, staff nearing burnout really, because they've just pushed through and carried on for such a long time. I think the other thing is that we're working in such a high pressure and high accountability system. We've got an awful lot of language and kind of pressure around at the moment around catch up, closing the gaps. Secondary school teachers are working so hard on teacher assessed, getting those teacher assessed grades right, robustly, kind of and accurately there for the children and young people. The other thing we're hearing about is that children and young people are really struggling themselves with their own mental health and wellbeing, and then in turn that's putting pressure on staff who are struggling to have the capacity to support them as they'd want to. So I think the picture is that we've just carried on, and now people are, they are struggling, and it's the length of time that this has gone on for, I think. If we think about the evidence, I've got a graph to hopefully show you. So this is a graph, you can see the reference on the screen there, and it's collated really from lots of the evidence that exists around other historic disasters that have happened, so earthquakes, other natural disasters, other pandemics. So this is a little bit of a graph as to what actually happens, what are the phases as we move through any kind of disaster. So you can see we've got a pre-disaster phase, so when everything just starts and we feel fear and uncertainty about what's happening. We move quite quickly into the impact phase, where people feel very intense emotions, so they feel shock, panic, disbelief as they recognise what's actually starting to happen. What we then get is a bit of a heroic phase, so we have high levels of activity, low levels of productivity, so people just start really pulling together, and there's optimism that we're going to return to normal really, really quickly, really, really soon. What we then move into is a bit of a honeymoon phase, again very productive, people working really hard, helping and supporting each other. We get that real community spirit, and there's kind of lots of positivity around as we all pull together. Unfortunately, as you can see on the graph, then what we then move into is quite a long period of time, which is a disillusionment phase. And then what we start to see is a loss of optimism as the situation continues for an extended period of time. Stress takes its toll. We see negative reactions around us in people, so things like exhaustion, just because of the length of time this has gone on, and an increased demand for services. This phase can last months or even years, and I think what we're hearing from, as a generalisation from people in the education sector, is that we are a little bit stuck in this disillusionment phase. We really want to move to the last phase, which is reconstruction, but that's really, really challenging because everybody is so very, very tired. The evidence says that how do we get to this reconstruction phase? Really what we need to do is take stock of where we are and have a period of time to rest, self-care, to really recover, and that will help us then move into that reconstruction phase. The difficulty is in schools, we haven't got that time, and it's not here yet, is it? So we've still got several weeks until the end of the academic year. We've got lots of pressure, we've got a high accountability system, and so we're struggling a little bit to move into that reconstruction phase because we just need some time to take stock, and we need to rest, really. So I think it's just so important that we do talk about this now, and we think about this now, and we think about it over the longer term as well, because this isn't going to be a quick fix. Both of those phases, the disillusionment phase and the reconstruction phase, can take months or even years. So we do need to be looking at that longer term picture. I think as well, why do we need to focus on this now? I think first and foremost, we've got a duty of care to all of our staff. We really need to look after the people in our schools because that's the right thing to do. It's so important. I think secondly, what we all know is that teachers in schools are our most important and valuable resource. So if we're not supporting our teachers and we're not supporting all of our staff in schools, and people don't feel cared for, psychologically safe, looked after and supported, they're not going to be able to best support the children and young people in their care, and they're not going to be able to be productive and effective in the classroom either. So I think it is the right time to be talking about this, and it's the right time to be thinking about and planning ahead, really, for short term but also long term. What are we going to actually practically do to try and address some of this? That was a long explanation.
No, that was really clear. Thank you very much for explaining the disaster graph. So Anna, where should schools start if they really want to make a difference to staff wellbeing?
So it's a tricky one, isn't it? It's a huge thing, I think, to kind of take on board. But I always think that the best place to start is actually making sure we've got a really accurate baseline for this. So it's not one or two people in a school making an assessment or judgment around what's working well for staff and what's working less well for staff, because we can make errors in those judgments, and we can make assumptions that things are the same for other people as they are for us, and with our kind of roles and responsibilities and personalities as well. So I think the first thing is to make sure we've got a really accurate baseline. How are staff feeling in your particular school right now? What is supportive and what is less supportive for them? And the best way to do that is always to try and run some kind of anonymised survey. Because again, what we know is when it's anonymous, people are more likely to be really honest about how they're feeling. If we have to put our name on it, if we have to put it in a very kind of open area in a suggestion box, people can see us doing that, and people are less likely to say how they really feel. So starting with a survey possibly, and there's some surveys out there that are evidence informed and use validated tools, so that we can be really, really sure and confident in the results of those surveys. So taking that baseline snapshot, really trying to work out what's working well, what's working less well. What are the levels of wellbeing like in our school for staff? What are the levels of stress at the moment? And by using some validated tools, we can see whether we're kind of tracking on average, whether we've got above expected levels of wellbeing in our school, or whether we've actually got below levels. of wellbeing, and then we can think about, actually, have we got a lot of work to do on this, or are actually we doing okay and we just need to make some tweaks and things to what we're doing. Excuse me. So I think for a start, it's always around, a really accurate, honest baseline, and then the really important thing is that we do something with that information. So it's absolutely unhelpful to collect all that information and then obviously not do anything with that. So I think the best things to do with it is to try and get a bit of a team together of interested people. I think there's lots of people really interested in mental health and wellbeing at the moment and wanting to support that agenda and move it forward. So I think getting a bit of a staff team together to have a look at your results and to make an action plan and actually talk and collaborate and share ideas for actually what would make a difference to move that forward. And then that needs to be regularly reviewed and shared with staff as well. And then I think alongside that, it really is so important to open up the conversation around mental health and wellbeing. So do we make time to do that in schools? Is it embedded within our culture? So I think there's lots of work going on at the minute, particularly with the recovery curriculum, with children and young people, getting them to kind of check in with themselves, talk about how they're feeling. Lots and lots of work on emotional literacy as children came back to schools after the full reopening. But is there an equivalent for staff? So are we modelling the model for a start, but also are we making time to do that for ourselves? I can hear lots of schools saying they've worked so hard on that with the children and young people, but I hear less about, actually we have open conversations as a staff team around that. We make time to do that. And I think what we know, again, if we look at the evidence and the research, for example, some recent survey results from education support taken, I think around October this year, suggested 57% of staff, education staff in schools, don't feel confident to share mental health issues that they have with any other member of staff, or even to talk about unmanageable stress. So that's really a high percentage. Over half of the staff surveyed said they just don't want to talk about it. They're not going to share that with anybody in school, not a line manager, not a peer, and they don't feel comfortable talking about unmanageable stress either. So it suggests that we have got a way to go with this, and I think unless we do really make time to open up the conversation around mental health and wellbeing, then things aren't going to change. We're not going to see people, I guess, people aren't going to feel like it's okay for a start to be struggling, and people aren't going to then seek early help and support because they're just keeping it into themselves potentially. So I think that's something to really think about. How do we do that, and how do we make time and space for that? We want that to be productive, so we don't want to encourage, obviously, lots of people just, talking and struggling and it just becoming everybody moaning about everything that's going wrong. That's not what we're suggesting, but it is really around having time and space to articulate, how are we feeling, checking in with each other, and let's really look at the things that are working well for us and the things that really aren't, and let's try and do something about those.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Final question for you this morning, Anna. What do you feel that schools need to consider for the longer term?
So again, it's a huge question, lots and lots of things, but I think always starting with the voices of staff, so just keeping that at the heart. So actually, let's just really open the conversation, work together, listen to the staff. What do they need, what do they want, what would be supportive for them. I think then it's about systematically and strategically working through those identified issues. It's not going to be quick fixes, but actually let's take one really big issue and let's really think about that over the longer term and plan for that. Let's monitor and evaluate the impact of any changes that we do make. So has it made a difference? If it hasn't, we need to stop doing it and we need to do something else. And I think a lot of this actually is around, what do we need to stop doing, as well as what do we need to start doing. But really carefully monitoring and evaluating the impact of anything we do, because it needs to make a difference. If it doesn't, we need to stop doing it. I think it's around as well just putting that wellbeing lens across all areas of your school really. So any of the work that you're doing, remembering to have that wellbeing lens over that and to consider that with all of the school improvement work that you'll be doing, all of any little changes to policy and practice, have we got a wellbeing lens over that, and have we really thoroughly considered that before we start doing something else? And I think in the longer term as well, it's thinking around wellbeing policy and practice. So making sure we pull all of the work we're doing on this together, that we do have a robust policy in place, but that it does actually match practice. And we need to make sure that's regularly reviewed, that staff are aware of it, that staff understand it, and it is part of what we do as a school. It's not just something that is on a piece of paper. So at KYRA, we have been thinking really carefully about how we can best support schools, because we've been hearing all of this feedback, and we really want to be there. We want to be able to support in the most helpful way we can, particularly if we think about next year. So we have been talking to schools about what the needs are, and we've been talking to some of our partners that we work with at KYRA to see if we can pull together some offers of support for next year that would be helpful. So we've got a bit of a range of things in order, hopefully, that there's something there for everybody that will meet everybody's needs. So we do work with Hope Smith from the Pilgrim School. So if people last year came to KYRA for mental health first aider training, they'll have met Hope, and she's fabulous. She's done lots of work with us over the last 4 years with all of our Mobilise projects linked to mental health and wellbeing. So you'll have seen her at cluster meetings coming along and offering advice and support and guidance, and she's also a really experienced trainer and outreach support provider as well. So we have teamed up with Hope again for next year, and she's got a really great range of CPD support options available for schools. So just to give you a couple of examples, she's going to run for us at KYRA a half-day session on, I'll get it the right way around, mental health for senior leaders. I said that the wrong way around before, and that's a whole different thing. But helpfully, mental health for senior leaders. So a half day with Hope to really look strategically at, across your organisation, how can we really look at mental health and what are the roles and responsibilities of senior leaders within that. She's available as well to do some sessions, a half-day session on staff wellbeing and resilience. And Hope's piloted this with some groups of schools that really came forward and said, we need some support right now with this. Our staff are struggling. We're experiencing some challenging circumstances within our school specifically. We feel like we need some support. So Hope was able to go along, and she's piloted this, just supporting staff to really, again, check in with where they are, validate and normalise feelings, and then think about actually how do we move forward? How can we promote resilience in our staff, in our schools right now and in the longer term? And again, she can do some follow-up work linked to that, either with specific schools or trusts, and we've got an opportunity to just book on as a school as well. So Hope's got a range of different things that she can offer. We're really confident that Hope, well, she's fabulous. She's absolutely fabulous if you've met her. And the schools that were involved in the pilot for the staff wellbeing and resilience said to me, I think everybody just needs a half a day with Hope. So that's fabulous. So we've got those offers to have a look at. We've also designed a half day, no we haven't, we've designed a whole year's project for Mobilise on staff wellbeing. Really as a result of the feedback that we've been hearing, and we've been working with schools and the Anthem Trust on this, and we'll be doing that into next year as well. So we've made that now an offer for KYRA Mobilise, so you can have 5 PLCs over the course of the year just focused on staff wellbeing. There'll be support from agencies, services, mental health charities and Hope within that as well, and we'll be looking at supporting you to develop really a clear kind of, again, tiered framework approach to how can we best support staff wellbeing. So universally, what does that look like? And then in a targeted and specialist way, what might that look like? So actually having the time to spend a whole year just focus on staff wellbeing. Equally, we've got Wellbeing and Workload, which is a 6-programme project, bringing the DFE workload reduction toolkit to life. So if it's workload, that you've identified as a school that is the thing that is really, really, causing those difficulties and that you want to work on, then we've got a programme specifically linked to workload reduction. So we're hoping that you'll see in the next few weeks, when our CPD offer comes out, a variety of support available, and we're hoping that there'll be something in there to meet needs that we're hearing about at the moment, really.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much for your time this morning, Anna. Having spoken with the KYRA heads over the last couple of weeks in forums, it is absolutely front and foremost at that, they're planning for next year. So it's really reassuring to hear that KYRA has lots of offers available around mental health and wellbeing. Thank you so much for your time this morning. It's lovely to catch up with you and have a and I'll look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Lovely.
Bye,
Thanks,
Anna.
Lesley. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.